Good morning, Wichita, and welcome to all of you to City Hall. We'll call this meeting to order. With us this morning is Pastor Debbie Garrett of Greater Deliveries Ministries to provide our invocation. Following that invocation, we will have our Pledge of Allegiance. We ask that you please stand for both.
Let us pray. Father God, we call upon you this morning to say thank you for watching over us, allowing us to arise fully clothed and in our right minds. Father, we invite you into our city council meeting. Let there be love and peace and unity among us. Father, today we lift up to you our mayor, Mayor Lily Wu, and her family, along with the city council leaders of Wichita. It is our prayer that they work together with all integrity and transparency, showing respect for each other as they serve our communities. We also lift up to you our police chief, Joseph Sullivan, and all our police officers, firefighters, and other frontline workers, and their families that have put their own lives on the line to help keep our community safe. As we move closer to the day where everyone expresses their love for one another, let us remember those that lost their loved ones in the plane crash over the Potomac River on January 29th this year. Also, our most vulnerable citizens, our seniors, children, youth, and our homeless in our communities. All these things we ask in Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Debbie. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting, February 4th, 2025.
Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? I see none. I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Proclamations today are Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Founders Day.
May I please ask all individuals who are part of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated to please come forward. Good morning to all of you. The proclamation reads, the city of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated was founded on the campus of Howard University in Washington, D.C. in 1908, making AKA the oldest Greek letter organization established by African-American college-trained women who have trailblazed changing patterns of human relations in America. Whereas Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated founders were conscious of the privileged position of college-trained women of color just one generation from slavery, and were resolute that their collegiate experience be as meaningful and productive as possible. Whereas Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated consists of women with high ethical and scholastic standards who work to improve the quality of life in their communities through education, service, and friendship. Whereas Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated cuts across racial, international, physical, and social barriers to help individuals and communities develop and maintain constructive relationships with others. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Lily Wu, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim February 15th, 2025 as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Founders Day in the City of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to celebrate the accomplishments of AKA members and their contribution to our community.
Good morning, and thank you for your accolades for us. We, the Beta Kappa Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, we appreciate you, and we are excited about doing service to all mankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our guests, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Public agenda. The public agenda allows for up to 5 speakers to have 5 minutes each to address the council. No actions will be taken relative to items on the public agenda other than referral to the city manager for information as necessary. Speakers will please state their name and address for the record. A time clock will display the speaker's remaining time to speak. Order and rules of decorum will be observed. The first speaker for today is Austin Smith, the role of enduring principles rooted in faith and wisdom.
Well, good morning. I have here a gift for you all. May I approach the chair? For the record, my name is Austin Smith. My address is 9350 East Corporate Hills, Unit 780952, here in the great city of Wichita, Kansas. This morning, I wanted to come to you all as a friend. What I wanted to bring to you was a new framework for problem solving. I'm in business and a citizen here in Wichita. If you're like me, I'm sure people come knocking on your door and send you emails regarding problems that really are not yours. So this framework is really a gift to you all. It's rooted in the principles of history. Our founding fathers used these things to separate powers and to solve problems. So to begin, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the nature of government. I'm here on page 1, laid out in historical texts. We see 5 realms of government. We see the self, family, ecclesiastic, commercial, and civil. All forms of government stem from the Trinity that we read about in the Holy Scriptures. The reason this is important is because the game has been set up this way. Whether you are a person of faith or not, this is how it's played. And I want you all to be as successful as possible in your roles. So that's why I'm here today, is because I've seen the news and I've seen the criticisms, and I also understand the hardships that it is being in a position of influence and a position of leadership as a problem solver. So at the time that I've got left, I wanted to jump down to page 4 and just briefly go over jurisdictional problem solving. Now, there are several presuppositions that I'm starting with, and I've listed those here on page 4 for you to look over and review on your own time. But really what it comes down to is identifying root causes. One of the primary questions to ask is, which sphere of government is primarily responsible for addressing these issues? Now today, I know you have a very full docket. Many issues are on the agenda, and you want to get through those as quickly as possible. So as you take time to review these, it's important to ask, to what degree are you responsible as city council members and as elected representatives to address these problems? And which of them is a responsibility of the individual the family, the ecumenical ministries or nonprofits in the community, and of business and commerce. After we identify the root cause, assess the available resources. Okay, what local, private, and civic resources can be mobilized? I would say it's not necessarily intuitive, but it is easy to centralize power. It's easy to step up and say, we've got this, let us take care of this for you. But it's time that we start taking responsibility for ourselves. It's time really for us to grow up as citizens of Wichita. I believe that this is the best city in the United States. We may not act like it yet, but I believe that we can become a model city. And then part of that is by embracing this jurisdictional problem solving and executing it on a city action councils. Step 3 is to develop an incremental solution from the bottom up and inside out. You know, you can't help people who don't want to be helped. Then implement and evaluate. I've put a visual on page 5 for you all of how this works. In closing, I'd like to say by restoring proper judicial balance, we create a framework that enhances civic engagement, accountability, and effective governance. Understanding and applying these principles will help city leaders and community members work together towards sustainable solutions. I'll be available for questions if you want to contact me. I think Mr. Glasscock and Mirwu can connect you with me. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Austin. Can you email this to us, please? Thank you. Madam Clerk, we have 4 more spots for anyone who would like to address the council.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is LaVonta Williams, and I'm here just for 2 things, and it's not to scold. But I want to thank you for having that opportunity and allowing people to be able to grieve because of the plane crash, because of the crash that left from Wichita, Kansas. I think it's very important that we do that on occasions when we have something as drastic as that. And I say that because I'm one of those that remembers the plane crash of 1965. And during that time, I was doing a media moment, and it was at that time that I realized we had no time to grieve. We never had the opportunity for someone to speak with us. We never had the opportunity for someone to pray with us. And so, although you may not know how beneficial that was at this time that we did it, please understand that later on, it will click in and people will understand. This is something that was needed. It's not a complete closure, but it definitely gets them on the road for closure. And as I attended many of the ice skating events and watched those young people ice skate, and many of you know the young people are the closest thing that I pray about, I was very concerned that that was the group that we lost. And I would also have to say that we lost a young girl who was on her way to becoming a great civil rights lawyer, Kia Duggins. And so please keep her name in your prayers as well. So I thank you for what you did on that opportunity. And on one other occasion, I heard my mom say, I'm the oldest of 9, and she always said, be grateful for what you have, be grateful for what you're given, and always say thank you. So on that $125,000 that you gave, as far as screening is concerned, I don't realize or I don't remember if I said thank you. So I do want to make sure that you understand that we appreciate and we thank you for what you do. And I am standing and hoping that we get the rest of it that's needed before the deadline. And so I just want to say thank you, and whatever we can get done before that time in June, I would appreciate it so that we can help those that are still suffering. So if you think about it, we had the plane crash in that neighborhood, that's an EPA issue. We had the water, that's an EPA issue. I still worry about the fumes from the trucks, that's an EPA issue, because when I was young, there was a meat packing place on 21st Street. you could smell the fumes at our home, which was 18th and Pyatt. So if the fumes could come to 18th and Pyatt from 21st Street, is there a possibility that the emissions from those 100 trucks that idle could make it to that community as well? I just wonder if we've already checked the air quality and let the community know that everything is safe. So being in your positions, I just want to say thank you for all you do and continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Levanta. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, former council member. I did want to give you an update. So City Council approved $125,000. Sedgwick County approved $125,000. And thanks to our partners at the Kansas Health Foundation, they gave $500,000. So we are at $750,000. We've only got a quarter left to go, and I'm confident we'll get there.
Thank you. If I had it, I'd give it to you.
We have room for 3 more individuals if anyone would like to address the council. I see none. I'll bring it back to the clerk. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Consent agenda items 1 through 19.
Are there any items to be pulled? Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I would like to pull item 18.
Any other items to be pulled? I see none. I move to approve the consent agenda without item number 18.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Councilmember Tuttle.
Not working. Due to a personal conflict of interest, I will be abstaining from consent agenda item 18. Thank you.
I move to approve item number 18 from the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. I apologize. I think I was supposed to open it up for public comment per our new ordinance. Were there any individuals that wanted to speak on this item? I see none. Motion still carries 6-1 with 1 abstention. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated February 10th, 2025.
Morning, Mayor, City Council, Josh Lauber, Department of Finance. The Board of Bids and Contracts convened on February 10th, 2025 for the following items. For engineering, we have the sanitary pump station number 70 and force main improvements to serve Harbor Isle Commercial's first and second editions. For Wildcat Construction Company Incorporated, for a bid of $1,694,060.50, subject to your authorization of a new engineer's estimate and budget authorization. We have the 2024 Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Phase B for Municipal Pipe Tool Company LLC in the amount of $249,306.01. We have the Water Distribution System to serve Brookfield Addition Phase 2B for Doling Construction Company Incorporated for $44,810. If you're wondering, this is an administrative approval we're bringing to you because it is assessed. So there'll be assessments against this property, why we're bringing it for less than 50. We have the Winston Circle Street improvements to serve Brookfield Addition Phase 2B for Pearson Construction LLC for $146,169.84. We have Argon Gas Liquid Form for Lambton Welding Supply Company Incorporated for an estimated annual usage of $182,428. We have the Municipal Financial Advisory Services contract change order for Piper Sandler and Company. We are requesting authorization to extend this contract to April 30th, 2025, and we'll have something shortly to you on new business. This is for the audiovisual equipment installation at Rockwell, Alford, and Maya Angelou Library branches for Conference Technologies Incorporated, doing business as CTI, for an aggregate total of $446,497.64. And for airport, we have the Flight View License Agreement and Route Mapper subscription for OAG Aviation Worldwide, LLC, for an aggregate 5-year total of $319,626.17. This is how to become a vendor with the City of Wichita. This is a purchasing calendar of items that city staff will be hosting or participating in with their small business resource partners. And these are open public opportunities out on the street today. And I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions, and I recommend your approval.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions for staff? I see none. I move to approve the Board of Bids and Contracts for February 10th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Petitions for public improvements, there were none. Community Services Block Grant Application.
Good morning. It's been a year. Don't come up it often, so I'm gonna make sure the space bar, correct? Yes, okay. So good morning, Mayor, Council. My name is Nichelle Williams, and I currently serve as a program coordinator for the WISCAP division, which stands for Wichita-Sedgwick County Community Action Partnership, and the Housing and Community Service division. And our director is, of course, Sally Stain. So today I bring before you our community service block grant. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background and to let you know a couple of new ideas and a little bit of things that we've done previously. So our community service block grant is a funding which lessens poverty in our community. You'll also know that it is provided through the U.S. Department of Health and the Human Services in the state of Kansas, which is our KHRC. It allocates funding to 8 community actions programs throughout the state of Kansas. This year, we have been allocated the most, and that is based off of our census tract. And we have the highest needs in the state of Kansas, so we are receiving the largest allocation in the state this year. A little bit about our timeline. In December the 2024, we received some guidance in regards to the amount to receive from KHRC. December the 6th, we just recently had our review board meeting, completed all the funding recommendations. I'm before you today to review our grant application. We are expected to submit that application to KHRC on the 28th of this month, and then our grant cycle and our grant year begins on April the 1st of 2025. A little bit about our CS review committee as well as our staff. We currently have a committee. It should include 12 people. That is the guidance that that is passed down from CSBG. Currently right now, we have 8 appointed by the council, 4 elected neighborhood resources. As you will see, we currently have 2 openings that are in several different of our districts. One is in District 2 or in District 6, I'm sorry. And then we have 1 vacancy currently in District 4. Ongoing communication and looking to fill those spots as we are getting those people placed into them. Our current people who are on our review committee do an amazing job, so thank you in advance for providing them. They are very engaged and offering a lot of opportunities to be able to continue to engage in our community. Our committee met on December the 6th, voted and approved program outcomes and expenditures, and then also with the 2025 program funding is based on the committee's recommendations that is before you. So we've done a lot of great work, and a little bit about our accomplishments you will see. These are 118 individuals who are assisted with employment. These are clients who are assisted with resume building, workshops, motivational interviewing, and those different aspects. We also have a contract agreement with pass-through dollars that we provide with project access,
and they provide services to underserved people in our community who are not eligible with insurance, from prescriptions, doctor visits, and several different things of that sort. Employment training of 74, those clients come in and those are people who we provide an alternative of support to get a certification. So if they're wanting to get their CNA, go and get CDL, if they wanted to pick up any of those different kind of sorts to pick up a certification, we provide the financial support for them. You'll also see that we also provided 178 eligible youth. What that is a partnership with Parks and Rec. We provide scholarships to parents who may not typically be able to afford financial services for their youth to have a safe place to go throughout the summer. And we have done an amazing job with that partnership with that team as well. Our current recommended funding that you will see for our CSBG recommends $589,777.03 funding of 4 city staff to operating expenditures. The staff administers the CSB funding and will assist a total of 275 eligible individuals. The healthcare we will continue to serve, which is $200,000 for the prescription assistance that is provided to Project Access, and they are looking to continue to serving at least 700 uninsured citizens. The employment training, which is the CSBG review, which is $190,000. You'll see that is an increase of what we had previously, which is a great opportunity, and we'll continue to be able to provide support to those, pay for trainings, and even increase a little bit of the scholarship opportunities that we have. Our summer camp activities will also continue with the $50,000 we will allocate to summer camp to provide the scholarships to over 175 eligible youth. You'll also notice on your budget sheet, you will see a little bit over $41,000 for the summer youth program of the Way to Work. This will assist in the pay increase of $921 for our youth and allow us 20 hours a week for them to work throughout the summer. A total of 175 youth are what we are expecting and hoping for to receive this summer. Law Department has reviewed and approved the funding agreement as to form. CSBG Review Committee recommends the City Council to approve the 2025 CSBG grant year application in the amount of $1,104,352.03 and authorize the signatures that are requested. I stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Nichelle. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Nichelle, especially for all your hard work. You guys up in housing are overtaxed quite a bit, and we really do appreciate all you do. What are the 4 city positions that we are funding with this?
So it currently would be my position and 3 family development. So those are like our specialists. So they provide the ongoing case management and support for that.
Okay. This doesn't touch CSRs. It's CDBG that we fund the CSR program with? Okay. Yep. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Nichelle. Appreciate all the work you and your team do. I just want to make sure I heard you right. You said the young people get paid $9.21 an hour now?
That is correct.
Wow. When I started, I got $5.15.
Exactly. I say that all the time. I was like, when I started, it was like $5.85.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know. I have been sharing some of that information about the program and having young people apply, but definitely appreciate all your work and glad to see that this funds a lot of good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, I love talking about the Way to Work program, so I think that this is a great opportunity for people to know about it. Can you talk about the application process? You're currently still recruiting, so tell me about the Way to Work program and how many hours, 20 hours per week, but for how many weeks do the youth get employed?
Absolutely. So the Way to Work program, actually, I tell people they actually start working the day after Memorial Day, but the youth are actually begin to engaging with us over winter break. So this year we changed it up. We opened up applications December the 20th, and we just
recently closed application on February the 2nd. We received a total of 297 applications this year, which was by far the largest we have received, so we are beyond excited. On March the 14th, over at the Wichita State Metroplex, we will host an event called Roundup. At that time, they will engage with our City of Wichita HR and go through those steps. They will learn about the program. We'll also conduct interviews with them, so they'll get an opportunity to interview. And some of them, this is their first time. The youth start at age 14 all the way up to 17, and then they're engaged with us at the entire summer. We'll have them from the beginning of Memorial Day all the way up until July the 31st of this year. They will go to work 20 hours a week, and then we host a workshop at Wichita State, and we are thankful for that continued partnership with them as well. We host a workshop every Friday, and they have a various different topics. As far as the work sites, they are engaged in different work areas throughout the entire cities, from big employers to small employers. We engage the entire community. Last year, we were received a great amount of employers, a total of 72 different employers inside this entire city of Wichita offered employers, and not only businesses, but also different departments inside of the city of Wichita offer that support, and we're great mentors to our young people. Sedgwick County played a big role as well as along with the Wichita workforce. So the community rallies behind these young people over the summer, offer them opportunities to gain a skill, and in addition to that, if you have an opportunity at 17, you never know where that may put you. We've had a great youth. A little bit over 5 years ago, we had a youth who engaged in our program in 2020. He came in at 17. He had just graduated high school, and we placed him over at the Wichita Transit. Once he was done, he was going to be turning 18 in a month. Wichita Transit held open that position until he turned 18. He went and applied, worked for Wichita Transit a little bit over a year, saw another opportunity, and now is working out at the airport, at Wichita Airport, doing airport mechanic. So that is a wonderful success story of the impact the impact that this program has and how vital it is in the city of Wichita. But he is still there, and he came on in 2020 and doing an amazing, amazing job.
Thank you for what you do and the rest of the team with the Way to Work program. Can you also address how you collaborate with, for instance, YMCA's job prep program for youth, as well as the Workforce Center's youth employment program?
Absolutely. So we don't do nearly as much as I think we should. I always am very transparent of offering ideas or suggestions, and we can always strengthen things to become better in the community. However, when we do have youth who have met a certain threshold, most of our 16 and 17-year-olds, if we've got them at 14, we always refer them over to the workforce because they have an opportunity to engage in Textron, Spirit, and those different avenues. And we want them to grow. We want their opportunities to grow. So we are always referring them over. Now that our application process is closed, we do get several youth who have missed the deadline, but we don't want them to be engaged in anything that is not productive of this summer. So we transfer them over and allow them to get connected to Camp Hype, which is through the Wichita workforce, or look for other jobs within that. So the great mentoring and partnership has been very, very vital. WPD also is very good in their juvenile intervention unit, and so they get involved with us as well. And so if we have a young person who is not able to get a job for some other reason, they are also boots on the ground and they have different connections. The prep program has done a great job with us as well. We have also been able to engage and refer different youth over to them, as well as they have created that same exact partnership and referred them over to us, depending on the need. It's enough for everybody, and so that is one of the voices that we are consistently creating, that we have enough people in our community and enough youth programs that where everybody can be able to make great impact.
Thank you, Nichelle. I see no further questions from the bench. We will now open it up for public comment. Are there any individuals who would like to speak on this matter? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I will gladly move to approve the 2025 Community Services Block Grant Funding application and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nichelle. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Police Policy Management Lexipol Contract.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Aaron Moses, Executive Officer with the Wichita Police Department, here first to discuss police policy management. The Wichita Police Department has over 130 departmental policies and 6 very large regulations that we've spoken about before here at Council. Currently, a single departmental employee is primarily responsible for managing updates to those policies and regulations. That employee also manages almost all of our AXON equipment in the department as well, so he has got a lot of work to do. I work very closely with him in his management of our policies. As you all know, in March of 2023, the Wichita Police Department, the City of Wichita asked Jensen Hughes to do an operational assessment of the police department. One of the key challenges noted in that report was challenges related to unclear policies, misapplication of policies, and then a lack of transparency in communication and decision-making from an executive and command level. In May of 2023, after Chief Sullivan arrived, the Wichita Police Department enrolled in the Kansas Law Enforcement Accreditation Program through the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. There were a lot of reasons for that, but we are currently in the self-assessment process for accreditation, and we are manually, myself and the officer who manages our policies, manually incorporating accreditation standards into our policies. So as policies come through for review at the executive level, myself and Officer Baird are actually reviewing those policies. We're cross-referencing against the accreditation manual and standards, and then incorporating accreditation content into our policies as we move forward. Under that current process, each department policy follows a designated review and revision timeline to be reviewed on a regular basis. However, what we find is policies are oftentimes referred out to other bureau commanders who then have to do significant research related to national best practice, changes to product, thinking of like our tasers, and then write up recommendations for changes to those policies. Those policies are then sent back to that single employee, Officer Baird, who then manages the review process from there. So he facilitates that policy, then going to the law department if necessary, going back to executive staff. Some of our policies then have to be reviewed by bargaining units, and then they come back to executive staff for a final approval and publishing. He manages that entire process himself. The PIO's office then, or the Public Information Office then, when policies are finally approved, upload those policies to our website for public access. There have been significant delays caused through this manual review process, and sometimes we find that while policies are being reviewed for updates, case law may change or other changes may happen, and we actually have to send those policies back through to be reviewed and updated again even before they get finally approved. To address these challenges, when I took over the accreditation manager position for the police department as one of my many duties, I began evaluating a policy management software solution to offer best practice policy content, accreditation support, and streamlining this review process, as well as a key piece of this is a mechanism to ensure personnel acknowledge policy updates. Currently, when a policy is finished and published, it is distributed to all of our staff via email. And there is no mechanism in place to ensure that staff review that updated policy, acknowledge the content of that policy, and there's no tracking mechanism to go back later on and see if that actually occurred. So that was a big key piece that we were trying to accomplish by looking at a policy management software. During the review process, we identified a competitively bid purchase cooperative contract with Lexipol. Lexipol is a nationally known company that serves I believe it's over 10,000 law enforcement agencies and agencies across the country. Staff evaluated demonstrations of Lexipol. We included the law department and IT department in those demonstrations, and feedback was positive from both the law department, IT, and WPD. Additionally, really exciting, Lexipol has already collaborated with the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center to integrate all Kansas Law Enforcement Accreditation Program standards into its policy content. That's a huge undertaking. There are over or almost somewhere around 200 standards for accreditation at the state level. That Lexipol has already gone in and worked with Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center to include those into their policy content. Why that's exciting is implementation, as we work through implementation, if this contract is approved, it includes a comprehensive cross-reference of our current policy manual with Lexipol suggested content, which will include those Kansas Law Enforcement Accreditation Program standards to identify where we have not met those standards in our policies and changes we need to make to meet them, as well as identifying content in our policy that can be strengthened to meet national best practice. Again, Lexipol serves law enforcement agencies across the country, from small agencies all the way up to agencies with 2,700 personnel. There is a one-time implementation cost of $108,000 for 2025, and then there is an annual recurring cost of $127,253. That includes the policy content and the ongoing accreditation support. I just want to call out here, many agencies that have an accreditation program that are our size employ somewhere between 5 and 10 full-time employees to manage that accreditation process. We currently have myself and an officer who do other duties as well. So part of that annual recurring cost is actually support from Lexipol to assist us through the accreditation process, which includes reaccreditation, building our proofs, building our files to go to the state in order to obtain accreditation. Funding for the contract has been included in the 2025 adopted budget for the police department, so there is no ask here today for additional funding that has not already been approved. Legal, I see I have a typo. Legal consideration. The purchasing manager is authorized under city code to engage in intergovernmental cooperative contracts and agreements to utilize those purchasing contracts. The law department concurred with purchasing manager's authority and reviewed and approved the contract as to form. Our recommended action is that the city council approve the contract and authorize the necessary signatures. I am happy to stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Captain Moses. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate you got a lot on your plate, so you've been doing your homework here. How does this interact with other governments in the state, such as county? We have some shared policies with county. Does this cover anything that we cooperate with them or the state with?
Yeah, so part of implementation is they will look at every single one of our departmental policies, and including anything that would be combined or referenced with the county. Something I can think of would be our advanced law enforcement response team that Chief Sullivan and Sheriff Easter created to investigate officer-involved shootings and high-profile incidents. So they would review that policy content, and what they would do is they would cross-reference against their policy content, and they actually highlight it out in different colors, and they'll say, hey, this is unique to the Wichita Police Department. This is something that Lexipol also suggests that you have. This is something you're missing. This should be a standard operating procedure. But at the end of the day, we retain authority to say, yes, we're going to include that content, or no, we're not. So any review, they'll review all of our policies, but at the end of the day, we have the opportunity to say, yes, we're going to include that, or that might work other places, but because of unique operations with ICT-1 teams or the alert policy, that doesn't work here. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so would the county get any recommendations as well? Or is this just strictly WP?
No, this is just us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I had a question regarding transparency and communication. How will this strengthen communication with community, but also help with greater transparency with community as well?
Yeah, so I briefly mentioned that under the current process, when policies are finalized and published, our public information office goes in and manually uploads those policies to our website. Part of the agreement with Lexipol and part of how the system works is they will now manage our online publicly available policy content, so it will be more quickly available for the public as we publish those policies. Additionally, for us, when people file requests for historical policies, there's a bit of a manual process we have to go through now to find those historical policies. We've had people make requests for policies from over 15 years ago, and we have to go track those down. And so Lexipol will also manage that process for us as well. They'll store all of our historical policies. It'll show what edits were made to policies, call them out for us. So that will also help with transparency. Additionally, not necessarily on the transparency point, but what we've seen is across the country, agencies that have moved to Lexipol, in Oregon, for example, they saw a 45% reduction in frequency of litigated claims against law enforcement agencies that moved to Lexipol in this content, and a 48% reduction in severity of claims that were paid out. In Colorado, similarly, they experienced 37% fewer claims, with 67% lower incurred costs. So, as we this is a way for us to benchmark ourselves against what's going on across the country. A huge thing with this, again, with transparency and accountability, is what we have found is many agencies, and this is part of why we're enrolled in accreditation, have policy content that conflicts. So when you have over 100 policies, you may have something here in this policy that conflicts something you have somewhere else in your policy manual, and that causes us challenges. So part of this agreement with Lexipol is that they will also look for that type of content in our policy manual, things that conflict in two different places, and call that out for us to address those issues. And also, they provide timely case law updates to policies. So if there is case law across the country that may modify some of our policy content or need to modify our operations, Lexipol will call that out for us and send us recommended changes to our policy manual as those updates happen. Additionally, part of what Lexipol offers is what they call opening the book. So we want our officers to refresh policy and not just pull up policy when they're in the middle of an incident that they need to reference. So one thing we're looking at further down the line after implementation would be what they call daily training, where officers are prompted to complete basically a scenario that says, if this, then what should you do based on policy? And it can also correct officers, if they pick the wrong thing, they'll say, hey, this is what the correct answer was, and this is why, and this is the policy it references.
You said that would be further down the line?
Yeah.
But an opportunity with this software?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Thank you, Captain Moses. We will now open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Twyla Purity. I live in District 1 in the Polo Club. This is just going to be a random kind of set of comments that I didn't hear answered, or maybe even questions I didn't hear answered during the presentation. One of them is related to ACLU appliance or compliance or approval. When I've attended presentations on the technology enhancements that we're covering, police department personnel said that some of the policies would meet like ACLU guidance. So I don't know if Lexipol does that. The recurring cost, is it fixed or is there an escalation to that? Was another question that I didn't hear answered. I don't know if it's necessary, but something to consider, because being on the Citizens Review Board, I heard repeatedly that a lot of the systems didn't interface well. So I don't know if there's an interface or if it's proven that this system will interface well with what we already have, with what the department already has. Employee access, is it going to be super easy for them? I think I heard Captain Moses suggest that it might be, but on the fly, quick access I think would be important. Was Lexipol the only company considered, or did they vet perhaps other companies and settle on this? Without the background, it's hard to know if this really is the best in the country. Perhaps it is, which would be great for us. And then I understand policies will be updated, which is terrific. If there could be within the city website, which I love these announcements that come out when you subscribe to something, that folks could subscribe to whatever it is. So that updates on policies, if something's updated, it's flashed out, whatever you call it, on websites, so that folks who are interested could go take a look at it. And then, it's not new that I have concerns over the lack of Wichita Police Department measurements that are available to community members. So since this was a police department topic, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Thanks for your time.
Captain Moses, would you like to address some of these?
Happy to do so. Thank you, Twyla, for calling out some of those things, because I did intend to speak about some of them. Recurring costs are fixed. It's based on the number of commissioned officers that we have on our department. So that is a fixed cost. We don't anticipate escalation of that in the near future. Interfaces, it's not a system that necessarily needs to interface with much. What we anticipate interfacing with is the city website. We do that with other things, both embedding things in the city website and linking to things in the city website. So I don't have concerns as far as that's concerned. Employee access, that's a great call out. Lexipol actually has an application that we can put on the officers' phones for quick access on scenes, on calls to access policy content. So that's something we're very excited about. Right now, they would have to pull out their phone, access the city secure site, get to our policy manual. It's all in PDF, so it's hard to search. So this will provide better access to our officers and our employees. No, Lexipol was not the only company or provider that we looked at. We looked at a company that we currently use to provide training, but they did not provide suggested content, and that was really big for us, was the expert policy content that was suggested by lawyers and law enforcement professionals from across the country. And as far as subscription to updates on the website, I don't know about that one. So I have a note to follow up with Lexipol as we move forward through implementation on that.
Thank you, Captain Moses. Are there any further comments from the public? I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. I will move to approve the contract and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Real-Time Information Center, FUSUS, AXON Operating System and Support Contract.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Captain Aaron Moses back again to talk to you about Real-Time Information Center Operating System. As you all know, we applied for and were awarded in November of 2023 two separate grants, the 2023 COPS Technology Grant and the Equipment Program, and the 2023 Bureau of Justice National Public Safety Partnership Grant. We came to council at that time and expressed our desire to develop a real-time information center for the city of Wichita and the Wichita Police Department, and the receipt of those awards was authorized. We have been working diligently to bring the real-time information center to fruition. Lieutenant Brian Safras is here with me today, and he has been spearheading that with Deputy Chief Paul Duff. Happy to say that physical construction on the real-time information center on the 5th floor of City Hall is underway. We anticipate operations in there sometime late May or early June. However, the core technology of a functioning real-time information center is the software operating system. So the physical center is great, but what we need now is the operating system to bring all of the technology together into that physical center and to our officers in order to make the real-time information center productive for our community. The way it works is the integration platform receives information from current WPD technology platforms, internal sources of information, and external sources of information. With technology platforms, think our AXON body-worn cameras, our taser devices, our dash cameras that we're currently testing. Those would be considered internal technology platforms and internal sources of information. External sources of information could be surveillance cameras that businesses or residents opt to give us access to. I'll speak about it later, but there are partnerships with real-time information centers across the country and the state that partner with school districts in order to provide access and information in case of an emergency at a school. These multiple sources of data support the collection, analysis, and response to public safety information to serve the community in policing, enforcement, and public safety efforts. I know many of you were at the town halls that we had this summer, or the breakfasts where we discussed real-time information, and one of the things that I talked about a lot there was using real-time information centers to right-size our response to emergency. An example that I talk about a lot was out of Oklahoma City when our officers were down there reviewing their records management system. They got to see how officers were dispatched to what was put out as an injury accident against a motor vehicle and a pedestrian. So you had a huge response. You had a lot of police officers, fire trucks, and ambulances responding to this scene. Their real-time information center was able to leverage their operating system to pull up city cameras in that area and see that there was not an injury accident involving a pedestrian. What there was a pedestrian walking near or in the roadway. And so they were able to right-size that that emergency response, down to 1 or 2 police officers to go out and contact this pedestrian and tell them to get out of the roadway. That's just one example of the way we can right-size our response. The platform brings all available sources of information to a single point of reference for the operators within the real-time information center and our officers out on the street. The hub is what makes the real-time information center work. It's the key component to gather available sources of information and assist in parsing that information into usable data for emergency responders. It is our objective to procure and install a state-of-the-art real-time operations platform to significantly enhance our ability to manage active incidents and post-incident investigations. We did release a request for proposals for Real-Time Information Center that was issued on June 6th of 2024. We received 2 proposals. A staff screening and selection committee was created, including representatives from the police department, the city manager's office, purchasing, IT, finance, public works, and law. Both proposals were reviewed, and the recommendation was to move forward with an agreement with AXON Enterprises' FUSUS product. We are looking at the enterprise service level package, which is priced at $150,000 per year. It supports up to 1,500 streams based upon outlined city needs and expected usage. When we talk about 1,500 streams, we're talking about one stream could be body-worn camera input from officers. One stream could be dash cameras. One stream could be drones. One stream could be surveillance cameras from a specific business if they opt in to provide us access to those cameras. So 1,500 streams we feel would be adequate at this time. Grant funding is available for the first year of operating costs based on those 2 grants that I mentioned at the very beginning. The cost upon expiration of grant funding will be included in the police department's general fund operating budget. We will continue to evaluate other grant funding opportunities for technology in order to push off the inclusion into the general fund operating budget. Obviously, we understand the city's position, and we will continue to look for those grant funding opportunities to continue operating the system. The law department has reviewed and approved the information technology agreement as to form. I will also call in here that Mike Maida from IT and his team were integral in this process in reviewing the agreements and making sure that we met the needs and requirements of internal IT as far as interfaces to make sure we keep everything safe as we look at bringing in streams of information to our system. It is recommended that the City Council approve the selection of FUSUS by AXON Enterprise, approve the information technology agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures. I am happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you again, Captain Moses. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm full of them today, aren't I?
Happy to engage.
I hear a lot of support from my district and the community for this newer, smarter way of just dealing with a lot of the issues that we have. One of the things that I do hear quite a bit, though, is just concern for privacy, making sure that we have the proper oversight and protections. So if I get down to the contract here on page 16, part 43, where we talk about confidentiality and records and audit, the line here under confidentiality says, without information provided by the city in performance of this agreement shall be kept confidential and shall not be made available to any individual or organization by the AXON without the prior written approval of the city. So 2 questions from that is, 1, who would be giving that written approval? And 2, do you foresee any circumstances where we would waive that right, I guess, or waive that confidentiality?
I don't see circumstances where we would waive the confidentiality. For the Public Information Office, work very closely with Sharon Dick Graff in the Law Department and Jennifer and her staff. And any waiver of confidentiality would obviously be discussed with the Law Department prior to that occurring. But I don't anticipate any circumstance where we anticipate doing that. What we may want to do is highlight the work of the Real-Time Information Center publicly, but obviously that would all be scrubbed for confidential information, the same way we do like our Well Done Wednesday videos on social media, where you'll see that we blur our computer screens, we don't show people's faces, we are very diligent about protecting people's privacy. And I'll also add to that that the operating system is really pulling in multiple different systems, right? Automated license plate readers, gunshot detection, things that we've discussed here and in the public. And each of those systems also have another layer of privacy protection built in, right? ALPR, we've strengthened our agreement with Flock to say that, or to make it very clear that we own that data, they do not, and they can't do anything with it. And so there's multiple layers of protection built in to this real-time information center. We are very sensitive to that. The chief is very sensitive to that. He has heard the same concerns, and we've been diligent about ensuring that our policies are in place in a way that we can catch issues, correct any issues that occur, and protect people's privacy and information.
Okay, so any waiving of that would have to go through the legal department. Okay. Second question is, if you go down to records and audit, they say the record shall be subject to inspection by the city or designated representative. The city shall have the right to audit billings both before and after payment. So just any of the records that we do audit, who in the city would be doing those audits? Would that go to our internal auditor or our finance department?
Mayor, that would be both our internal auditor and possibly our external auditor if they were to do sampling.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
And just to add to that, we work very closely with Christina on many issues, and the chief would not have any issue, obviously, with Christina conducting those audits.
I did have a question regarding the streams. So this current contract would be for 1,500 streams. Do you find that to be sufficient enough? Because every patrol officer has a body-worn camera, so that would be considered one stream or multiple streams?
Yes, that would be one stream. So that we do feel 1,500 streams would be adequate based on what we've seen with FUSUS at other locations and the evaluation we've done of what we anticipate going into the system.
Can I also ask, I know that the other option was to go to 4,500 streams, which would be double the price, but also much higher number of streams. Can you tell me some cities that may use 4,500 streams, or is that atypical?
Kelly Herron is actually here from FUSUS, so I'll defer to him to answer that question because he is the expert on all things FUSUS.
Thanks, Captain. Madam Mayor, Council, thanks for having me. Kelly Herron. For the record, I'm going to back up one thing. The body-worn cameras, all the AXON ecosystem is a data point. It does not count as your streams. That would just be the CCTV streams, the cameras that will count as that 1,500. Working with the city and scoping it out, I'm a retiree from Kansas City, Kansas. We also have the enterprise package, which accommodates the 1,500 streams. Recently, we sold to Seattle. They had several thousand streams, so they're part of the enterprise package. New York, part of the enterprise package. And I think what's great is the ability to scale out, because the agency always has the option to purchase more streams as they scale out their real-time intelligence center, if that helps answer the question. So based off working with your folks, the 1,500 is a good place to start, and we'll be able to ingest everything you need to get up and going in your real-time intelligence center.
Thanks for the clarification. I always get data points and streams mixed up.
Last but not least, when you gave the example of the incident where it was not an actual pedestrian versus vehicle incident, but rather an individual on the road incident, in that situation, police would be called, but also fire would be called and EMS would be called. So are there opportunities for this being a multi-department type of effort? I see Arctic or the Real-Time Information Center Arctic being utilized, not just by police, but also fire. And I know Sedgwick County takes care of EMS, but I see much more integration.
Thank you for the question. It's a great call out. We've actually started conversations already with Elora Forshee, the Director of Emergency Communications. We anticipate that as long as their staffing stays where it is, that she will actually want to embed a dispatcher into the physical center to have that direct connection to what's going on at the Emergency Communications Center. We share the same vision that this is something to be used for the entire city. As we move forward and bring on more technology, the Chief's vision is a whole city approach to crime prevention, crime reduction, and crime response. Not to get too far off the question, but we hosted actually a training here last week about risk terrain modeling, which talks about addressing crime based on geographic features in the community of what's driving the crime, right? It could be a hotel motel, it could be a bus stop, it could be many things that we can address, not just from the police department, but engage our partners in city government. And so we do anticipate this center being a center for everyone in Wichita, not just the police department.
Thank you, Captain Moses. I see no further questions for you. We will now open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Twyla Purity, District 1. I live in Polo Club. So my comments are based on my over 48 years in running medical practices. And before that, actually, I worked for a software company that automated billing services for medical practices. So I've experienced a lot of software implementation and upgrades. I just bring up these just for consideration. A lot of times with software companies, what's promised is not delivered. So it's been valuable, usually in implementation. Now, I don't know what happens, in the civic world, but in implementation, they'll have an implementation team that comes in, and they'll work with everything, getting everything set up and doing the training. I hope that the contract or maybe the arrangement with this company allows for an appropriate amount of time, and if it's not going well, that they will leave their folks on site until implementation is completed to the satisfaction of the city. It may be beneficial, if it hasn't already been done, to call references, other communities that are using this, and ask them these questions. And what would they have done differently? What do they wish they had known then that they didn't know then, that they didn't know now? So those sort of probing questions, because what you want is a really successful implementation. So to be as thorough and intentional about that, I think is going to benefit all of us. Software updates, I hope and I want to assume all updates are included in this annual fee. Another thing that I didn't hear addressed is data storage. Is data storage part of this? What about these cameras that are going to be fed in from the community? How long is that going to be stored? What's the access to that? Is it going to be commingled? Is it storage deliberate to the city? I don't know. I didn't hear anything about the data storage. Operating system software updates. Okay, and then body-worn cameras, since AXON was mentioned, there was, promise is maybe too strong of a word, but a few years ago at the bowling alley incident with moonlighting officers, I believe there was a commitment from the department to have moonlighting officers wear their AXON cameras. When I asked about it at the substation open house, it was explained to me that it's really difficult because cameras are assigned to officers. They'd have to come and get it, and maybe it's not convenient for them. But it's important to our community and the community of District 1 that moonlighting officers do wear their AXON cameras, and I would, hopefully my information's out of date, but if not, I would like for the city to move forward more quickly on making sure that these folks have their cameras with them. Thank you.
Are there any other individuals who would like to speak? If not, I see that Captain Moses will address some of these concerns.
Happy to do it. I'll start with the discussion about body-worn cameras on secondary employment. That is incorrect. It's inaccurate. Our policy does require officers to wear body-worn cameras on secondary employment. We've actually addressed the concerns related to battery life and things like that by having additional spare cameras at each station. We've trained all of our officers how to check out a spare camera for a secondary employment opportunity and apply it to themselves. So our policy now reads that we've actually increased on duty now to include lieutenants that are on duty having to wear a body-worn camera. I myself have been issued a body-worn camera that I have to wear while I'm in uniform, and we are working on the plan now to issue them to all detectives. So the only people you should see working a secondary employment at this time that do not have a body-worn camera would be detectives because they haven't been issued. We're working on that process. That one employee that I mentioned in the last presentation manages that process as well, so he's working on getting that done. As far as an implementation team, yes, there will be an implementation team from FUSUS as part of this contract. There's also verbiage included in the contract as far as acceptance testing, so we'll do thorough acceptance testing before we go live. Additionally, FUSUS is an AXON product. We have been very happy with the customer support from AXON that we've received. Anytime that we have an issue, the chief has actually reached out directly to the CEO of AXON, and we've been able to have calls with him directly to say, this is the issue we're experiencing, and we expect to have a resolution, and they always deliver that resolution. So we do not have a concern as far as ongoing support. And as far as references, the chief and I were in Washington, D.C. last week for Major City Chiefs Association. Real-time information centers are things that these large police departments have across the country. I know many of you have traveled across the country with Deputy Chief Duff to look at real-time information centers and see how they operate. So yes, references is something that we are very, very keen on. We work very closely with the Oklahoma City Police Department. You heard Kelly mention that the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department operates with FUSUS. I believe the Shawnee County Sheriff actually has FUSUS with the school district up there, providing information from the school district. So yes, references is something that we lean heavily on, especially through our relationships through the Major City Chiefs Association with the larger agencies across the country.
There was one last question regarding storage.
Yeah, data storage. I'll let Kelly talk about data storage.
So storage, since you were already an AXON customer, everything through e.com, evidence.com. So we also have our core devices that offer tactical storage on the core devices themselves. It's meant to be referenced quickly in real-time events to help give officers palatable information for situational awareness as they're going to calls. But then it can be stored into evidence.com, which is part of the AXON ecosystem that you already have. So unlimited storage back to evidence.com. Does that help, ma'am?
I'll just expand on that a little bit. I think some of the concern is that we're going to keep all of this information forever. That is not the case. As Kelly mentioned, if someone chooses to install this core device, which we'll do a lot of public education about what that means and what that looks like on their surveillance cameras, our intention would not be, and we would not ever, keep all of the video from that camera forever, right? That data, like Kelly mentioned, is meant to be accessed in real time so that officers know what they're responding to, or we can right-size our approach.
Thank you. I see no further questions or comments from the public, so we'll bring it back to the bench. I will just say that I had the opportunity to visit the Arctic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and have seen and heard from those who are utilizing the system. And I know that technology is a big driver that Chief Sullivan has been advocating for, as that will bring greater transparency and greater communication amongst officers so that they can respond, as well as first responders responding appropriately to an incident. So I really am encouraged by this technology and the new Arctic, knowing that this is going to be in our community. as we continue to have our number one priority, which is crime, reduction of it, prevention of it, and then emergency responses. So I am very supportive of this. And so I move to approve the selection of FUSUS by AXON Enterprises, Inc., approve the information technology agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Grant application for core area drainage improvements for District 1 and 6.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. The item before you this morning is a request to submit a grant application for drainage improvements within the core area. This is generally in an area bounded by Broadway, Hillside, Central, and 9th Street. I'll show you a map and talk about some specific areas here in just a moment. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, notice a funding opportunity was issued for this particular grant, known as the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or PROTECT grant. This program provides almost $9 billion over a 5-year period for planning and construction projects. Staff had reviewed previous awards to other communities, which generally included drainage and paving improvements, often in disadvantaged or underdeveloped areas, which much of this core area is. So I might show you a couple of pictures and some of the prevailing problems. Wichita's core developed ahead of modern drainage regulations, just as other parts of our community did. It's been a challenge for us to catch up to that. We've had a desire over time, this area that you're going to see, to try to fund some of these structural drainage improvements and just haven't been able to get to that point. A lot of our community is flat, as you know, so topography and physical barriers have created conditions for recurring nuisance and life safety flooding. I'll show you a couple more pictures too. So the proposed drainage improvements could address this flooding, promote viability for development and living in the core, ensure access to critical facilities. This is in the Midtown area. We see this often at times. I think this was last year at one point in time when we actually had some rain. Pretty intense event. This does evacuate. The system is in place. It just can't handle certain events. If you look at that middle picture, you can kind of see that the water's up to the bottom of those cars. The picture to the right is most recent from snow melt. Still not a lot of areas that these drainage is currently provided because of the existing infrastructure. Last picture I'll show you is Murdoch near Mosley. You can see water is knee deep. There have been times over the years barricading has been necessary for public safety, close off these roadways. That obviously adds to our resource burden and cost to accommodate these situations. So looking at the map of the area that we were proposing, to the left again is Broadway. That upper left-hand area where the number 1 is the Midtown area. The green lines that you see are proposed storm sewer improvements. All of these areas would include rebuilding the streets where the storm sewers are at. Over the course of time, as we've seen these drainage challenges, you get water sitting on the streets for long periods of time. It starts to create issues with the paving. So part of this project, and where we get to a pretty big cost that we're estimating and requesting for the federal grant, is to replace all of these streets at the same time. So one of the areas that helps us out is through our outsourced pavement preservation program. A lot of these streets within this area are poised to be improved and fixed over the next 10 years. So if we were successful in a grant like this and can take care of a lot of these paving improvements at the same time, that's going to provide additional resources for elsewhere in our community with the OP3 program. Look a little bit closer at the area to the west. You can see Via Christi Hospital kind of center left there. We have a project in our CIP program for 2027 to 2029 to make drainage improvements related to access issues to the hospital around Murdoch and Wabash. Those funds we would use as offsetting for a local match. I'll talk more about in just a moment. The number 2 that you see is Murdoch itself. Project would include a large drainage structure under Murdoch over to the Wichita Drainage Canal, which you see to the right side there under 135. So it would include complete reconstruction of Murdoch. And again, the rest of the green lines that you see here our proposed new storm sewer, new infrastructure under the streets, rebuild the streets at the same time. These improvements would address recurring, as I talked about before, localized nuisance and life safety flooding concerns. We're certain that this would help promote infill development, private investment, and again, ensure access to critical facilities like the hospital. Looking to the east side of 135, I'll start with the map on the left. I know that looks like a lot. What this is a floodplain map. So the pink being the floodway. If you look over to the left side, the Wichita Drainage Canal, you can see that's the same color. The blue being the 100-year floodplain, the yellow being the 500-year floodplain. This is an area that we talked to Councilmember Johnson and brought to my attention not long ago, wondering if there was something that we could do to make improvements. The area that you see kind of right in the middle that curves to the upper right is the Frisco drain. So we've got infrastructure in place. We've got the ability to areas that we can take some drainage. We just don't have the infrastructure beyond that to get the water there. So what we looked at with those green lines in the same area would take most rain events to the Frisco drain, also to the Wichita Drainage Canal. None of that infrastructure is there now. It's not going to change this floodplain map drastically, but it will make improvements, certainly during most of the smaller events. The picture to the upper right, if I can explain to you what you're looking there, where you see the graffiti along the walls, that is the Frisco drain itself. You can see the canal route in the background where the drainage canal is. One of the things that happens here during larger events is when the Wichita Drainage Canal fills up, it backs up into the Frisco drain, and then it creates problems for this neighborhood that drainage can't get out. What you see in white there is building what we would call a seawall with flap gates. We have this in other areas where drainage currently goes to the drainage canal. Water gets up high enough, it doesn't allow it to back up into the neighborhood. It allows higher drainage to evacuate and get out, providing overall improvements. Bottom right picture then is the Wichita Drainage Canal itself. So just to reiterate, we've got areas we can take drainage to. We just don't have the infrastructure in place, the pipes under the ground to make that happen. That would be the real focus of this project. There are many vacant properties in this project area. Whether they can be attributed to lack of infrastructure or drainage or not, we're confident that if we're able to make these improvements, we can make this a more viable area, make properties most likely more developable, and bring vibrancy back to this core area. So to kind of summarize the different pieces of the proposed grant is to construct additional drainage infrastructure along throughout this area, and the corridor will address nuisance and life safety flooding, reduce or eliminate some of the floodplain areas that I showed, provide better access to Via Christi and other critical areas, and promote infill development within the core. You can see that upper right picture is on Topeka. Because we often see high water, there are signage in place in some areas for the traveling public to avoid the same. There have been related planning efforts within these areas over the years that I wanted to mention real quick. So the Central Northeast Area Plan, which is the bulk of this area that we're looking at, this planning area, identifies drainage improvements as a priority. The Midtown Neighborhood Stormwater Master Plan, which is currently being updated by our planning department, identifies aging stormwater infrastructure as a concern for area residents and highlights a need for updated stormwater infrastructure. And then the Community Investment Plan also identifies a need to replace aging stormwater infrastructure throughout this area. We have developed a cost estimate just short of $48 million with a request of just over $38 million in federal funding for this grant program. Again, looking at other applications and awards for communities across the country, this reflects the same size, same magnitude of projects. We didn't intend to necessarily match what anybody else did, but I think it worked out well when we started identifying the boundaries and where we could get to, that we felt like this was proper to submit. The required local match of $9.5 million, staff's been working closely with the state of Kansas Infrastructure Hub and the Build Kansas program. We have had very positive feedback and their willingness to help support the local match. And so we're going to continue to work with them Any balance of that local match that would be needed would be included in our stormwater utility fund from the capital improvement program, particularly from that project I mentioned that would roll into this overall improvement project. So pending council action today, what happens next is the application is due February 24th. An announcement of projects would be this fall, with funds needing to be obligated by the fall of 2028. If we are fortunate enough to receive funds, we would get moving right away on design so we can start moving towards construction. A successful grant application, again, would provide funding for design and construction. And then if unsuccessful, as we've worked through these federal grant programs in the past, we've had some pretty good luck with having debriefings with federal officials, finding out where we can do things better. And then generally it doesn't take much to reapply because this is a multi-year program. One thing I do want to mention before I get off this slide is letters of support are a big part of these programs. They often bolster our chances of being successful. We have been reaching out through conversations with Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Ballard to community groups, neighborhood associations. We've worked with our state and federal lobbyists to secure letters of support from legislators on both levels. Anybody who happens to be watching today and wants to support this project, the more letters of support we can get, the better. This can be from anybody in the community. It can be people who live here, business owners, churches, whatever it might be. We would take letters of support. So we'll keep pushing on that. We've got a template we've created. We've made the process a lot easier. So we've been able to talk to a lot of folks already who've been willing to do that, and we'll keep pushing on that part because that has helped us on previous grant applications. With that, staff recommends City Council authorize the grant submission, acceptance upon award, authorize the necessary signatures, and any necessary budget adjustments. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gary. I know this is extremely important to Midtown, so appreciate you doing the extra work to try to include them. I have a couple questions. You answered the one about if we're unsuccessful, they potentially could give us feedback on where we could improve in the grant process, I assume?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, if awarded, would this interfere at all with the canal route study?
No, and one thing we would for sure make sure happens is that this is integrated with that conversation. I know you've been part of those. We're staying in close contact with KDOT. They've currently had a little bit of a delay on moving forward with their study. It'll still happen soon, but we'll make sure that all of this works together.
Okay. Also, have we ever won bids of this magnitude? I mean, it sounds like a lot of money to me, but in your world, maybe it's not.
The last successful federal grant we were awarded of this size was to fill in the gaps on the North Junction. The city was the applicant on that, and that was a $21 million award that, working with KDOT, I think really helped that project move forward. We've been working on submittal of a similar grant for the Kellogg and Eisenhower Airport Parkway interchange and kind of the north campus of the airport. We feel like we're getting closer. We've been through a couple iterations. That's a programming grant right now, but could lead to future construction funding also. So this is fairly large in the grand scheme of what we're doing, but I think it's a great grant for us to look at for what it can do for the core of our community.
Okay, two more quick questions. Is this like an all or nothing grant? Like you get it all or maybe part or?
I think in the past, what we have heard from the federal level is it's not necessarily, they will come back at times. That's not unlike some of the discussions we had on the North Junction. I think it's possible that they may come back with discussion and consideration of some type of partial award. We've seen that happen before. That's probably what would happen. Most likely, if we were unsuccessful in the discussions that we would have, it could be that there may be a suggestion to change the scope of the project, to look at smaller area, focused area, whatever it might be.
Okay, and then my last question is, you said potentially if it's not successful that we could reapply in 2026?
Yes.
Right? So would we just reapply or obviously take whatever feedback they give us, but we would just reapply, basically making corrections or whatever, and it would be the same scope unless they suggested
Correct.
something different.
Correct, just like we're working on now, I mentioned at Kellogg and Ridge, Eisenhower Airport Parkway. We have taken feedback and reapplied. North Junction grant, we got that grant awarded on the third try. And so we made some changes throughout all three attempts based on very specific feedback we had from the Department of Transportation and Federal Highways Administration.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, I have a simple question. So for some reason, the state doesn't award the funds. Would we have the intention to cover from the 1% of total funding cost about the 19% of total funding cost?
We, the funding that's in the CIP right now for the project that I mentioned is almost $4 million. If we were fortunate enough to be awarded the $39 million federal grant, I think we can make this work within our stormwater utility, within the CIP, as far as being able to bond that capacity.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, are there other areas of the city that also have this? I know there's one at Gilbert and St. Francis because it's outside my window at the clinic. It goes way over the curb and stays there for a day. Are there other areas that also can draw attention? Possibly
There are. I talked about how flat our community is, and what I mentioned before about many areas of Wichita being developed before current drainage standards. So that impacts a lot of our community, a lot of the real central area of our community. We're working through looking at, once we can get the Bleckley project going, looking at future plans for what funding would need to be and look like to start addressing other areas. We try to, with our current stormwater utility fund, and the funding structure of what folks across the community pay, look now at some of the worst areas. And so there are some that are on our radar already, but this particular area, I think, is probably the biggest one that we can wrap our arms around, contiguous area that's just, there's just no infrastructure in place at all to deal with some of these issues. So for the purpose of trying to be successful in a grant like this, I think there's a lot of value in focusing on one area. And so we originally didn't even include Midtown. We stretched it out to that because there are some significant issues there. It's just on the other side of the hospital, so I think that made sense.
I have several questions, but they are questions to try to encourage community to send those letters. So number one, can you actually send the letter of support, the template, to all council members?
We can certainly do that.
And then as people are watching online as well as here in attendance, these letters of support can come from all individuals, correct? It can be just simply residents of the community that see a problem and want to be part of that solution. Is that correct?
They absolutely can. We've seen some of the other awards we looked at had in excess of 50 letters of support. In talking to our federal lobbyists in the past and our experience with other grants, there's no end to the number that we would take.
I'm going to keep encouraging for those.
And
You said 50 letters is about what a successful.
Well, one of the other successful awards I think we noticed was in excess of 50 letters. So I don't know what that means. We're trying to get to a point of just getting as much support as we can.
The goal is over 50.
Sure.
So I'm going to.
We'll set that as
I
the
will
goal, yes.
encourage not only council members to write those letters, but also encourage community members who live or work along that area. Wanted to know if any of our local media have done stories regarding this type of flooding in that area.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure they have. You know, we've had a lot of, I mentioned Blackley, and there's been a lot of focus on that area over time, but I suspect so. We haven't had as much rain the last few years, unfortunately, but I'm sure over time there's been a focus on this area, yes.
I would encourage, as part of that application, to take clips of whether it's the Eagle or any of the television stations that have done stories along this really contiguous area. as part of that application, just showing that there's evidence that this is a major problem. And then I wanted to know, can you tell us again, what makes it a successful grant? Because obviously this is very sizable, and we will be going to DC in March to advocate for our federal agenda. And this seems to be something that very much could be at the forefront of our ask.
So I think there's so many different grants out there since the IIJA and bill has been in place in particular, but even prior to that, there are, if you were to look online, there are more grants than you can even count in so many different areas. These larger infrastructure grants like this are very popular. It's not uncommon for certain grants to have 1,000 applications across the country and awarding 10% or less of those. That's how it was with the bill grant that we won for the North Junction, so they're highly, highly competitive. I wish I knew the answer. What we've heard, what we've talked to folks about, what we've seen, I do think geography comes into play at times. It looks to us like, when you look at a map of awarded projects, that there's a desire to have some balance in different areas across the country. There has not been a grant like this awarded in Kansas yet, so keep our fingers crossed. I don't know if that means anything or not. But you know, what we've been told in the past is that community involvement, community support becomes a really, really big part of this. When we talked to the USDOT about the grant for the North Junction, they said there comes a point in time when that's really what drives it the most. The technical side is important, it gets you there, and then community support from council members are the things that get us over the top. So I really think this area, being what we would consider LIDAC area by census data, the challenges of the area, we looked at the vacant lots, the historical issues that have been there for development and redevelopment. I think it's a really good story to tell, and I think we can point at a lot of the lack of infrastructure, the drainage issues, those pictures that you saw that continue to create problems. It feels like a good story. When we looked at the other awards, I think we compare pretty well to some of those same things. So I wish I knew the answer, Mayor, but it's been a mystery to us on a lot of these for years now.
Knowing that this is near one of our two major hospitals, would seem to be a major driving force of trying to get even more community members to write these letters of support, as that would be an access point to a critical infrastructure piece, which is a hospital. So I'm very excited about this, and knowing now that the state of Kansas has not gotten this type of sizable grant in recent history makes me want us to really advocate for this for our community.
And just to be clear, that's for this particular grant program. We noticed there hadn't been an award in Kansas. So yeah, I might mention one more time, the project that we have in our CIP now that's been designed, it's funded for 2027 to 2029, came about because of access issues to the hospital and some historic problems. You can imagine what happens when roads are flooded and you can't get people in and out of the hospital. It's not a good thing. So that's where that started, and it really just grew from there.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
I see no further questions for staff. We will now open it up for public comment. I see no one from the public. We'll bring it back to the bench. This resides in Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Ballard's districts. Councilmember Johnson.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I was actually going to say something. I just want to thank Gary and the team for the work done on this. This is a big deal and a great opportunity, and the conversations we've had over at Halls about the flooding in that area, and I've personally driven around the flooding, not driven through. Turn around, don't drown. But I'm excited about this and hope that it can work out for us. It would significantly help that area quite a bit, and again, free up resources for the city later on the back end. So with that, I would move that the City Council approve the submittal of the grant application, acceptance upon award, any necessary budget adjustments, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
CUP 2024-30, CUP amendment to CKM Community Unit Plan, CUP DP 45, to allow entertainment establishment in the city for events with entertainment and alcohol associated with a fitness club on Parcel 3B, generally located on the northwest corner of East Central Avenue and North Woodlawn Boulevard, 6100 East Central Avenue.
Good morning. Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. So as you heard, the applicant for this case is requesting amendments to the CUP regarding Parcel 3B of the CUP, so just a portion of it. And that request is to amend it in order to allow for entertainment establishment as a permitted use. Now, a quick note about CUPs is that they are an additional layer of zoning that goes on top of the base layer of zoning for a property. In terms of the request, the applicant has indicated that they are requesting the amendments so they can have entertainment with alcohol at the site. The applicant has also indicated that they intend to continue operating the fitness center at the site. In terms of the property, the site is generally located to the north and west of Central Avenue and Woodlawn Boulevard. The subject site consists of one ownership parcel. It's approximately 1.45 acres in size. It's currently zoned LC Limited Commercial, located within a community unit plan, and is developed with a fitness center and related parking lots. So there's a parking lot to the north and a parking lot to the south. The existing community unit plan generally extends from Central Avenue all the way up to Murdoch to the north, and from Woodlawn on the east all the way to the waterway, which is shown on this aerial, to the west. Doesn't quite get there, but almost. The community unit plan includes multiple properties, and they are generally developed with commercial and office uses. The community unit plan has multiple zoning parcels within it. The subject site is on, again, community unit plan parcel 3B, which contains the entirety of the subject site. In terms of context, properties to the north are zoned GO General Office within the same CUP and developed with a bank. North of that bank, as you can see here on the photo, are properties zoned MF18. They are also in the same CUP and developed with townhouses. Properties to the south are zoned LC within the same CUP and developed with a bank. Property to the east is zoned LC within the same CUP and developed with a multi-tenant commercial building that includes an animal hospital, beauty salon, and medical supply store. Property to the west is zoned LC and developed with a retail store. In terms of the staff report provides information about entertainment establishment as a use and the zoning process. It also describes the parking requirements, the municipal code and entertainment regulations, and also regulations related to the city noise ordinance. In terms of review, on December 2nd, the District Advisory Board considered this request. The action of the District Advisory Board was to recommend approval 7-1 with two additional conditions. And those are that the applicant shall communicate parking agreements and that the applicant shall erect a fence on the east side of the property if that is allowed. At the DAB, questions arose about the ability to install that fence along the east border of the property. The intended purpose would be to reduce the overflow parking onto the adjacent property to the east. And one of the owners of that property spoke in opposition to the CUP amendment at the DAB meeting, citing traffic and parking overflow concerns. So, following that meeting, then, on December 12th, the Planning Commission held the public hearing for this item and voted to defer to the January 9th meeting in order to provide an opportunity for the applicant to resolve complaints about overflow parking with the adjacent property owners. And again, that member of the public, that neighboring owner, was there citing concerns about the applicant's inability to provide adequate parking. Then on January 9th, the Planning Commission heard the case again. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the application per staff comments, and that vote was 13-0. And those conditions are listed in the staff report. During the discussion, the Planning Commissioners discussed the fence and concluded that a fence on the east property line was not possible since the property line is currently a right-of-way for vehicular traffic. The Commissioners also discussed creating access from the west side from North Brookside Street, which that access would have to be created through a neighboring property, which is not owned by the applicant. Again, one of the neighboring property owners, the same one who spoke at the DAB, spoke in opposition to the CUP amendment, again citing concerns with traffic and overflow parking onto their property. So with the protest period, during the protest period, 3 protests were received against the application. However, they were received after the end of the 14-day protest period and are considered invalid. Therefore, the request can be approved with a simple majority vote or 4 of 7 votes. So in terms of recommended action, it is recommended the City Council adopt the findings of the Planning Commission, approve the CUP amendment, adopt the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the City Clerk to publish a resolution after approval. And again, that would require just a simple majority of 4 of 7 votes. Alternatives include the following. As always, you can override the Planning Commission, adopt alternative findings, and deny the CUP amendment. That would require 5 of 7 votes because it's an override. Or you can also you may also return the case to the Planning Commission for additional consideration. That would just require a simple majority of 4 of 7 votes. Just a quick note about the process. City Council policy is that the public hearing occurs at the Planning Commission meetings, and according to the policy, the City Council does not typically receive public comments on zoning items. So with that, I'll take you through some of the graphics and aerials. So here's the site photo. Again, the site outlined in that blue-green color. Here's the zoning map. Those were described earlier, but again, you can see primarily office and commercial uses, or I should say zoning. In terms of the comprehensive plan, sites identified for new employment uses. Here's the protest map. Again, it shows the protests that were turned in, but they were invalid because they were after the required date. Here's photos from the site and the surrounding area. This is looking to the south at the site, looking from the east to the west, looking from the south to the north. This is looking at the property to the north, looking to the east, to the south, and to the west. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
What are the questions for staff? I'll start. What are the other businesses that are surrounding this applicant
Sure.
and their hours?
Oh, their hours? Well, I can tell you their uses. I don't know their hours specifically, but I can venture a guess. So to the north is a bank, so I would assume that that would have regular business hours. Then also to the south, you have a bank as well. And then to the east, you have a strip shopping center, and that has a vet in it. Let me see, I think there's also a medical supply store. So I don't believe that any of these operations have late hours.
And the applicant is looking for later hours, is that correct?
Well, they're actually looking for the opportunity to have a combination of entertainment, so maybe bands or music, plus alcohol at this location.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. This does not get public comment, is that correct?
That's not typically, that's correct.
Councilmember Johnson's district.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott. This item did receive quite a bit of conversation at DAB from one of the adjacent property owners. While I do appreciate the suggestion from the adjacent property owner and DAB's attempt at hearing him, I do feel that adjacent property owners have their own property and can erect their fences if they so choose. So my motion will be the DAB recommendation minus that suggestion. And with that, I move that the City Council override the MAPC and approve the requested CUP amendment with the conditions approved by MAPC, subject to an additional condition recommended by DAB. This motion would approve the amendment with the Planning Commission recommended conditions, plus an additional requirement that the subject site property owner or representative shall communicate parking protocols to event organizers and people who attend events. In support of this, I offer the following findings. The proposed CUP amendment would allow alcohol and events at the site. We have heard from at least one neighbor that this proposed use will have a detrimental effect on their properties because of overflow parking. We also received multiple late protest petitions against the application. The additional requirement for communication about parking protocols should help to address the overflow parking concerns.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
CUP 2024-46, CUP amendment in the city to the Dukes Diamonds Community Unit Plan, DP 86, to allow an off-site billboard sign with a maximum height of 35 feet, generally located north of I-235 highway and on the west side of the North Seneca Street.
Hello, Scott Wadle again. So as you heard, the applicant is requesting amendments to a CUP. So very similar to the last one, this is CUP is another layer of zoning on a property. In this case, the applicant's requesting amendments in order to allow for an off-site/billboard sign as a permitted use on the property. And then second, to allow the maximum height of that sign to be 35 feet. This item is being heard today because the DAB and Planning Commission have different recommendations. I'll describe that in just a moment. In terms of the request, the applicant has indicated they're requesting amendments so that they can have the billboard on the site. About the site, well, the site is generally located to the north of I-235 and to the west of Seneca. It consists of one ownership parcel. It's approximately 9.9 acres in size. Zone GC General Commercial is located within a community unit plan and is developed with 2 athletic fields and related structures. The existing community unit plan includes the subject site and the property to the north. In terms of context, property to the east across North Seneca is zoned planned unit development, is used as a private recreation vehicle campground, and does permit one off-site billboard sign. However, no billboard sign has been developed on the site. Property to the west is zoned GC. It's within a different CUP and is undeveloped. The general provisions of that CUP prohibit billboard/off-site signs. Property to the north is zoned GC within DP 86, so it's the same CUP, and is utilized as a storage area for off-duties for school buses that are not in service, so it's a vehicle storage yard. Properties to the south across I-235 are zoned TF3, two-family residential district, and MF29 multifamily residential, and developed with duplexes and apartments. In terms of the staff report provides information about signs permitted on the subject site and a review of the Wichita Sign Code. In terms of review, on January 9th, the Planning Commission held the public hearing for this item and recommended approval 13-0, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. No members of the public spoke in opposition to the application at that public hearing. On January 13th, at the District Advisory Board, they considered the requested CUP amendment and recommended denial. The vote there was 4-2. Members of the public spoke in opposition to the request with concerns regarding light pollution that a digital sign might cause to the residential properties to the south, and possible decrease in property values and safety concerns regarding distracted drivers. In terms of protests, no protest petitions were received against the application. Therefore, it can be approved with a simple majority of 4 out of 7. So the recommended action coming to you from the MAPC is to adopt the findings of the Planning Commission, approve the CUP amendment, adopt the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the city clerk to publish the resolution after approval. Again, that would require a simple majority, 4 of 7 votes. Alternatives include the following. You can override the Planning Commission, adopt alternative findings, and deny the CUP amendment. That would require 5 of 7 votes because it's an override. Or as always, you can return the case to the Planning Commission for additional consideration, which just requires a simple majority of 4 of 7. And just a note about the process, that public comments typically take place at the Planning Commission meeting. So with that, I'll take you through the photos and graphics. So here's the aerial of the site. Here's the zoning map, again showing GC is what this is zoned. It's that pink color. This is the map from the comprehensive plan showing that new residential is recommended in a portion of this site. Here's the graphic from the CUP document. Here's the notification area and the protest. Again, no protests were submitted. Here are photos from the subject site and the surrounding area. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Just one quick question. So that area is already allowed to have a billboard though, correct?
Good question. So not in this particular CUP. There are some properties nearby. The property, I believe, to the east is allowed to, but not for this subject site. Their CUP document actually is silent on it, and so in this case, if a document is silent on a particular land use, then they have to have it amended to explicitly allow that land use. So in this case, they're requesting permission to do that.
So the property to the east would be,
Yes, to the east, it's the one across Seneca. So it's this one with a lake. Sounds like it is developed with an RV campground.
thank you.
Sure.
And are there already lighting along that route 235 because it is a highway? I would assume that there's already light pollution there because there's light.
I believe that's a safe assumption, yes.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions for staff. This resides in Councilmember Ballard's district.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to override the MAPC, deny the requested CUP amendment as recommended by the District Advisory Board. In support of this motion, I offer the following findings. The proposed CUP amendment would allow a billboard to be installed at that site. We have heard from multiple neighbors that this proposed use will have a detrimental effect to their properties.
Second.
Motion and a second. I have a couple, I guess, comments before I make a vote. That's why I asked the question regarding lighting. It is next to a highway with lighting, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, if there's already light pollution in that area because it is a highway.
Because it is an interstate, I do believe that that's correct.
So there's already light pollution in that area, is that correct?
I think that would depend on how you define light pollution, but there are already lights in the area.
Okay. Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you. That baseball diamond is also lit, is that correct?
I'm not aware if it is.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I guess I have, before I make a vote, I also need a couple of clarifying questions. So billboards pop up around our community, and it always becomes an issue with people saying that there's light pollution or detrimental to their property. Can you give us solid examples where the value of property has actually gone down because a billboard has been installed? And then additionally, I'm just trying to think of how this is reasonable. If this is a property that currently on the north side doesn't have homes abutted to it, but rather the homes are on the south side of the highway, this just does not seem reasonable. Can you address, I guess, when people say this will be detrimental to their property values?
In terms of the first question, have we been presented with a study that demonstrates that billboards cause property values either to decrease or to not increase as much as their neighbors? We have not been provided any research to that point. That's not to say that there isn't any out there, but at the same time, we don't have any. We've not been provided any. In terms of the regulatory environment and how this is handled, I think over time, because the zoning code and the sign code have evolved to have this process of review, I think that shows the sensitivity that the community has towards it. Not leading one way or the other in terms of approval or disapproval. I just think it shows that there's consideration that's taken into whether or not billboards are appropriate for a given site.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, and I would have asked this probably before, but now that this has kind of gone in a different direction. So I think I know the answer to this question. There weren't any protests, correct?
That is correct.
And I'm trying to think of how to ask this. Part of that is there's no residential close to that. Is that correct?
Well, there is residences to the south, And looks like we lost, here we go. So let me go to.
But across the highway, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
So here's, but to that question, here's the notification area, and the purple is the boundary. It was 750 feet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion fails 4-3. Vice Mayor Johnston.
I will make a motion to have the City Council adopt the findings of the MAPC and approve the CUP amendment, adopt the resolution authorizing necessary signatures, and instruct the City Clerk to publish the resolution after approval.
I will second that. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 4-3. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Zone 2024-51, zone change requests in the city from LI Limited Industrial District to MF18 Multifamily Residential District to create a residential development generally located on the east side of North Greenwich Road within 1/4 mile north of East 37th Street North.
Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. So for this case, the applicant is requesting approval of a zone change from LI Limited Industrial to MF18 Multifamily. This item is being heard today because it was deferred by the City Council to today's meeting. Just a note also that the applicant, just yesterday and even this morning, is requesting an additional deferral of this item. So, and the time that they have requested has varied, but they are requesting a deferral. In terms of the request, the applicant has indicated that they are requesting the zoning in order to develop the property with residential uses. In terms of the property, as you can see here, its site is generally located to the north and east of 37th Street in Greenwich. It is approximately 20 acres in size, just over 20 acres. It is one ownership parcel and currently in use for agricultural purposes. In terms of context, property to the north is zoned rural residential and developed and is in use for agricultural uses. Property to the east and south is zoned LI, owned by the applicant and in agricultural uses. Property to the west across Greenwich Road is zoned rural residential and in agricultural uses. In terms of the staff report, it provides additional information about development standards, potential dwelling density, parking, and airport hazard zoning because of the proximity to Jabara Airport. In terms of review, on November 21st, the Planning Commission held the public hearing and recommended approval of the zone change request. On December 9th, the District Advisory Board reviewed the request and recommended approval. There were no public comments at either of those meetings. On January 7th, the City Council reviewed the request. At that meeting, the applicant's agent requested to have the item deferred to the February 11th City Council meeting in order for the applicant and the City of Wichita to work together to determine the availability of water at the proposed site. At the time of writing this report, it sounds like there's been no update on that in terms of a conclusive answer. No protests were received against the case, therefore it can be approved by a simple majority vote of 4 of 7. In terms of the recommendation from the Planning Commission is that the City Council adopt the findings of the Planning Commission, approve the requested zone change, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the City Clerk to publish the ordinance after approval. Again, requires just 4 of 7 votes. Alternatives include the following. You can override the Planning Commission, adopt alternative findings, and deny the zone change request that would require 5 of 7 votes. Or as always, you can return the case to the Planning Commission for additional consideration that would require just a simple majority of 4 of 7 votes. And just a note about the process in that public hearing and public comments generally occur at the Planning Commission meeting. So with that, I'll take you through some of the graphics real quick. Here's the aerial. Here's the zoning map, again showing this pocket of industrial zoning. Here's the map from the comp plan, showing new residential just barely into this area. Here's the map from the comp plan, also showing the urban growth areas, and this is in Wichita's urban growth area. Here's the notification and protest map. Again, no protests were received on this application. Here are photos from the site and surrounding area. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? I'm a little concerned since I know that this was delayed to today, but there's still no update on the water situation or a conclusive answer on water.
I think it's a challenging issue, just given the geography of this area. In talking with Public Works, it sounds like it's just this area in terms of getting the water pressure for the type of development that's proposed. It would be challenging and could require additional infrastructure. So I think that's the discussion that the property owner, the applicant, and the city of Wichita are having, and I don't think that there's a conclusive decision on how best to move forward with that.
And when you say additional infrastructure, who would pay for that additional infrastructure?
I think that's part of the questions that are in discussion that are taking place right now.
Again, that concerns me when it comes to this particular property. Can you go back to the map where it showed the growth area? So it's just barely in it, correct?
It is, well.
The other, I think there's there.
Sure, with this one. So it is within the city of Wichita's urban growth area, but in terms of areas that were identified and recommended for additional residential growth, that is correct. It just barely comes into this subject site.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. This resides in Councilmember Tuttle's district.
Pardon me. Thank you. Thank you to Scott and JR for meeting with me. Thank you to Gary and Public Works for your time and attention on this issue. Thank you to Legal, Jennifer and Abby. I appreciate your time and your guidance. I too have concerns regarding this is the second delay, but after meeting with Public Works and having discussions, I understand that this will be, it is my intent this will be the last delay on this issue unless it comes internally from staff. And I'm going to make a motion here in a second to delay and have a time frame, and Public Works feels that we should have the information that we need to proceed with this by that time. So I move to defer the case until May 13th City Council meeting. In support of this motion, I would highlight the following. The applicant has requested an additional deferral, and the deferral will provide additional time for the applicant to learn more about the potential water service in the area. So again, I would anticipate this will be the last delay. Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Streets and parking lot rehabilitation, Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Jesse Romo, Director of Airports. This isn't one of our big, sexy projects. This is really just related to pavement repairs that are necessary around the airport. And probably best I just kind of walk you through it with this aerial picture or drawing. Excuse me. There's a portion of our loop road that needs repair. Other portions of that loop was already done and completed, so this is kind of what's left over. Also, Airport Road, you see from Harry northward. North is kind of facing towards the right on this picture. Airport Road was just done a couple years ago too. This is the remainder of that portion. And there's some parking lots that we have responsibilities for with our tenants on our properties. And that's the majority of what this project is looking at. In November of 24, we used the city's procurement process. We advertised for consulting services, and we ended up getting only one response. We did talk to a couple different companies, and we expected about 2 bids, but they ended up joining forces. And based on their qualifications and experience, there was concurrence from the committee to award the contract. This is a design portion of the project, so we haven't moved to construction yet. The design and bid phase services contract, it's a not to exceed, so it's capped at $206,000 and
possibilities of coming in a little bit lower, we hope. Initial project budget of $250,000 is requested for design and early project expenses. Once design is complete, a budget increase request for construction and construction-related services will be forthcoming to you. The adopted CIP includes authorization for this project, and it is fully funded with airport revenues. It's recommended that the Wichita Airport Authority approve the project budget, approve the contract, and authorize the necessary signatures. With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jesse. Any questions for staff? I see none. I just wanted to say publicly thank you, Jesse, for your leadership under these very challenging times and for bringing this before us, which is part of your day-to-day. I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Mayor.
We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. I'll bring it back to the bench. I move that the Wichita Airport Authority approve the project budget, approve the contract, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Council member appointments and comments.
We'll begin with appointments. Council members, any appointments? I can't see my screen right now. If anyone has any appointments? I see none. It will now be council member comments. Council member Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say yesterday I did go up to Topeka and testify on a bill talking about eviction, sealing eviction records. I also spoke with some legislators about the scrap metal bill as well, returning the ability to enforce our ordinances back to local control municipalities and whatnot. We learned Friday about the hearing, so I didn't have time to get my travel approved. I'm not going to be looking for any reimbursement or anything, but I just want to make sure we get it on the agenda for next week to go back and approve that travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoheisel. Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a ask for staff. I wanted to bring it up from the bench as well regarding the solar regulation changes. I would ask that this body ask the county commission to consider the change for the urban growth area. This would allow the city of Wichita to explore conditional uses for the large-scale solar projects in the urban growth area. Right now, it's restricted under the language adopted by the county, and so this would just give us the ability to look at projects on an individual basis if they're an application in the urban growth area.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm definitely supportive of that, Councilmember Glasscock. And then just to add to Councilmember Hoheisel, it's HB, wow, I forgot it as I was saying it, 2357. Yep, so HB 2357.
Any other council members? I see none. Thank you all very much. We do have a 12 o'clock in the boardroom regarding the opioid settlement funds. So that is up on the screen right now. Actually, I will adjourn this meeting and then we can have this meeting.
Excuse me, Mayor, before you adjourn, if I can make a suggestion. Responsive to Councilmember Glasscock's request about the solar regs, it would be more helpful to have it formalized in a motion. Ideally a resolution, but we're, I think, short on time. But if you could just make that as a motion and
Yeah.
we have an actual vote, that would be clear for the record what has happened.
Mayor, do you understand that? Okay. With a motion that the city of Wichita requests that Sedgwick County amend the Unified Zoning Code regarding solar, so that large-scale solar projects, 50 acres or more, could be allowed in the city of Wichita urban growth area identified in the county urban growth areas, map contained within the Wichita Sedgwick County Community Investment Plan. Notes to the motion This would allow large-scale projects to apply for conditional use in the Wichita urban growth area. It doesn't guarantee any commit for approval.
Second.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I can't push a button, so I'm sorry. And I was fine with it just as a, request, but now that we're actually making a motion, I just have a question. So we are asking the county to do, have there been communication with them? I mean, can you just, I don't know anything about this, and so I don't know exactly what we're instructing, asking the county. It seems like there should be a conversation process before we vote as a body. I haven't seen any language, I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, so I brought this up in a workshop that we had last year regarding concerns with the urban growth area. The county presented regulations to us already regarding this as well. This has went through months of deliberation through the county process. When the county heard it, I attended a public forum at the Sedgwick County Extension Office regarding this previously as well. So there's some knowledge. I don't think this is an endorsement of the policy. It would still have to come back before City Council to actually amend the zoning regulations. That is correct. So this would eventually come before this body again. This is to allow them consideration because it has to go through both bodies of government.
So, if I may, follow-up question. We're just asking them to consider amending.
Correct, yeah,
And
the
Can you
language-
read the
yeah.
language again?
Yeah.
I'm a visual, so I'm sorry. This is
Yeah,
hard for
the
me.
language is the City of Wichita requests that the Sedgwick County, I'll say, consider the amendment to the Unified Zoning Code regarding solar, so that large-scale solar projects could be allowed in the City of Wichita urban growth area, identified in the county urban growth areas map contained within Sedgwick County Community Investment Plan. Again, continuation of my notes, this would allow large-scale projects to be considered to apply for conditional use in the Wichita urban growth area. It doesn't guarantee commit or approval.
So one just last question, this may be silly. We can't just ask them to consider it, it has to be done formally this way? I'm confused.
That's
That's what
the
Jennifer
direction
said.
of legal,
Yeah.
Yes,
It was my suggestion that if it is the will of the council to make this request, it should be codified, or at least formalized in a motion, otherwise
And
there
we,
was no record.
right, and we suggested this process because you don't want one council member to bring something to the commission representing council intent. And so the council member is doing what is outlined in your policy, and that's bringing an item to the bench to be considered. And then, again, this is an amendment, and only will it apply to the Wichita urban growth area, not to any other city's growth area, which I think was part of the issue when the commission was hearing it previously.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm just a really visual learner and I have to read it, so thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. I will move to adjourn our city council meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. We'll see you at noon. Thank you.